Hi, my name's James Kello. I'm a London beer sommelier. Welcome to the BERMONDSEYbeerMile. So here we are on Druid Street at one end of the BERMONDSEYbeerMile. We're going to start with Southwark Brewery. Okay, here we are in Southwark Brewery. I'm about to speak with the owner, Peter.
I'm Peter Jackson. I'm the original founder and managing director of Southwark Brewing Company. It is the final part of my career in the brewing industry. For 35 years I worked at some big breweries, so it's quite nice to have something of my own at the end of that. But we've been here 5 years now, and we are a small to medium-sized micro, I would say. We're not one of the big boys.
Okay, so our first beer is the London Pale Ale by Southwark Brewery, and actually this will be your hardest pour of them all. This is a bottle conditioned beer, which means that it will have some sediment at the bottom. So we want to pour this carefully, but at the same time, I'm a big fan of pouring beer kind of vigorously. You want to get a nice foam on it, so doing those two things together, gently but vigorously, a little bit difficult, but this is going to be my go at it, so let's see how we go. I'm going to get it from a reasonable height, and the foam comes up nicely, but hopefully I've not disturbed it too much as well, and it's poured, actually really clear, big foam on it for sure, but it's poured really clear, so I'm happy about that. Let's let that settle down for a moment. So when we're talking about how a beer looks, kind of the three things you're really looking for there are colour, clarity and carbonation, and you know, the carbonation, as I say, is big and foamy, and that's partly, you know, how I've poured it. The colour is a beautiful golden colour, and it's completely clear, as I say, despite being bottle conditioned, and you can see there is a, you know, persistent carbonation. It's not huge, but bubbles coming up the glass. And this is a funny beer because it's a classic English pale ale in terms of the production, in terms of the yeast and the malt character, and yeah, definitely you can pick the kind of bready notes, and the yeast character is there, but it's with the addition of the Citra hop, which is obviously not a classic. It's an American hop. It's not a classic hop, so it's kind of, yeah, it's very much a British beer, and this brewery is a kind of, yeah, is a mixture between being modern and traditional, so I guess this being their flagship does make a lot of sense. Yeah, this is a great place to start on our tour, because this is this is a balanced beer. There are plenty of, you know, hop forward, big hoppy beers on during the tour, but this is a balanced beer, and all of the ingredients are making their presence felt here. There's some grassy notes, slight elderflower, and some citrus, of course. It's kind of light to medium bodied, I would say. And there's initial sweetness, of course, from the malt, and actually kind of white grape. That's quite a strong note of that. So yeah, this is a pale ale. Depending where you are in the UK, it might be called a bitter, of course. Traditional style, as I say, kind of updated for the 21st century. Balanced, refreshing, crisp. So yeah, floral, malty, bready, elderflower, white grape, citrus. Very sessionable. Okay, so one of the things I love about Southwark Brewery every time I come down here on a tour is the fact that they are a modern and also a traditional brewery at the same time. So what I mean by that is they're making the modern American pale ales, IPAs, these sort of modern craft styles, but they're also making some of the tastiest cask beer in London as well. Peter's going to tell us about one of his best-selling beer, their LPA, London Pale Ale.
Well, LPA was the first beer we brewed, and I unashamedly say it was a beer brewed for me. It's easy drinking, light, citrusy. It's made with Citra hops, which is my favourite. 4% ABV, so it's quite sessionable.
Yeah.
Sessionable is my favourite word in the brewing industry. It means you can drink lots of it. And I can tell you over those 5 years I have. But it's easy drinking, it's a modern style, traditional cask beer, and it's also bottle conditioned in the bottle as well.
That's it. Yeah. Here we are, stop number 2. This is the Barrel Project, which is the tap room of the London Beer Factory. So yeah, the London Beer Factory is a brewery started by 2 brothers, Ed and Sim Cotton. This is their tap room, as I say, the Barrel Project. And as well as being where you can drink their beer, this is also where their barrel aging program takes place. Barrel aging, mixed, spontaneous and wild fermented beers, aged beers, dark beers as well. Made away to be drunk later on, and I hope we're going to be able to speak to someone in here about their barrel aging program. Pouring it to try and put a bit of a head on it, but not too forthcoming. Yeah, pours hazy, kind of a ruby red. Nice looking beer, and actually, yeah, I've managed to put a decent foam on there. Yeah, the Berliner Weiss style, kind of the basis on which all kind of the modern sour, kettle sour, quick sour beers are made. So with lactobacillus, and yeah, the style is. I'm sure most people would have tried a sour before, but if you haven't, it can be a bit of a surprise. This is a sour. So in recent times, so when sour beers first really kind of came out, a lot of them were, yeah, wincingly sour and you know, a lot to take in. It took me quite a while myself to enjoy sour beers, months actually, but I kept having a go with them, and it's just a flavour. It's just it's not from the kind of the British tradition, from the British canon, if you like, and yeah, Napoleon's troops called the style the champagne of the north when they moved through Berlin, and it's a summertime beer over there. It's super refreshing. This is a bit stronger in alcohol than a classic Berliner Weiss, and obviously it's got with the addition of fruit in there. It's actually kind of more full-bodied as well. It's actually, once you get past the tartness of it, it's quite sweet as well. But yeah, it is definitely straight away pretty tart for you, and of course the cranberry as well. Yeah, I definitely do get blood orange too, with the cranberry straight away. I actually get quite a bit of cherry on that too. And I think that the sweetness that's behind it is it's from the lactose. So this has a little addition of lactose, so milk sugars. Anything ending in ose is a sugar, and lactose is not digestible by ale yeast. It's a lovely looking beer. Let's see if that foam comes back. I'll say it's a pretty sour. The addition of the lactose is definitely welcome with it. I would suggest this one. I mean, is super refreshing and tart on its own. If you find that, you know, it's a bit much for you, that's absolutely fine. I mean, you know, strong flavoured beers are, you know, that's kind of the point, right? We want strong flavoured beers, we want interesting beers, and not everybody's going to enjoy every beer. This, I think, is fantastic. It will go brilliantly with cheeses, particularly soft cheeses. So think about camemberts and bries and stuff like that. And the kind of the creamy, oily fattiness will be a great counterpoint to the acidity in this one. And the acidity cutting through the creaminess of those types of cheeses. Yeah, I would certainly say this is a food beer. Little sip is a great one for a tasting. It's a great one to share. Of course, it's not designed to be drunk in a pint. That's an experience for sure. So I'm here with Braden Liu. Braden heads up the London Beer Factory's Barrel Project. Braden, do you want to give a little idea of what that means, what you're doing here?
Cool, so essentially we make core range from our normal brewery, and then here is where we make the more interesting, more long-term kind of projects. We take beer that we brew just down the road, We ferment it on site in some stainless steel fermenters down this way. When that's finished fermenting, so typically 10 days or so, we move it to all of these lovely oak barrels that you can see all around. Wrap them back under the stacks, and then they age for about 12 to 18 months typically. We taste them once a month, decide which ones we think are going to go nicely together, pull them back down into a finished product, and then we package it naturally carbonated in bottle and keg.
Right. And it's mainly sold through here, is it, through the barrel project?
Mostly, we make a really small amount of beer. The quality is quite high, and it's quite a complex product that we make, but because we only make a very tiny amount of it, most of it goes through here. Yeah. The rest of it goes through our online store, which is kind of. Typically, we only do maybe 100 litres in bottles, and then some kegs.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much.
Possible to run something like this size as a financial business that is running in the green. Like Wildfire, my previous brewery was, they don't make heaps of money, and it's still 100% a passion project, as is all beer. Brew beer to make a lot of money, because it's not.
You're probably in the wrong game, aren't you? Yeah.
For sure. So you can run it financially, but it's definitely your setup, your delays. Like when you put your first beer in a barrel to when you bottle your first beer is probably in excess of a year and a half to 2 years. So it's a long-term setup where you're not seeing any kind of cash flow for the first year, which makes things difficult.
So what you're saying is, if someone's coming in here and buying a beer, in the barrel project, in the tap room, or if they're buying a beer from the supermarket, from this brewery, essentially you're a patron of the arts at that point.
Absolutely.
You're helping to fund the creation of the barrel project up here. Yeah.
You are supporting. Well, I mean, myself personally, and my love of beer. And we treat each of these barrels as has its own story, has its own evolution, I guess, over time. Sometimes they go through phases of not tasting great and then tasting good, and it's kind of, you get to know them, and then you get to make decisions on whether they'll stick around for the long term. So you're supporting a passion project that is very slow and very difficult to maintain, and really big. You factor in the first year probably 15 to 20% losses of the beer that we make here. It's a huge loss and a huge potential for failure. It's definitely a little bit more interesting than factory. Moving from essentially lab cultured mixed firm saisons into purely wild ales with wild yeast. It's happening very shortly. The beers are tasting really good, so that's been my pet project, and I'm really kind of looking forward to that point. It's come full circle, because obviously it is such a long waiting period between start the project and actually seeing some kind of.
And with these these wild and these mixed fermentation beers, are you always trying to create something new? Do you ever try and create classics that you've enjoyed elsewhere? So I don't know, say Flanders Red or Gers. Are you ever trying to make recreate something you found delicious elsewhere, or is it always something that's brand new to you?
We dabble in a little bit of both. So we use 8 hops. We use a similar grist to a lot of Gers, Lambic-based breweries. We create a darker base beer that is similar flavour-wise and aromatically to Flanders Red and stuff like that. And then we branch into using New World hops. We do a lot of dry hops, mixed firm saisons. You've got light acid and then a poppy, punchy kind of aroma and flavour. We do a bread IPA, which is pretty New World, and that's kind of a fun little experiment that we play on. So we dabble in and out of new and old, and we do have our 2 base work streams are a blonde base and a dark base, and then we play with other varieties as we go along.
Which is and so obviously you mainly this is the brewery and this is where you're fermenting and where you're blending. Do you ever come down on Saturday to the tap room to see how your beers are getting enjoyed? Listening in on a couple of conversations maybe, and try and read people's faces as they take their first sip of the beer you made?
Absolutely. I love Friday afternoon eavesdrop. So as soon as I finish, everything gets put away, we mop the floor, we clean up. I'll perch at the bar and just kind of listen in and
see a few conversations.
See how the bartenders are going, see what they're serving, see what they recommend, and then see how it's received from our beers. It's good to get some honest feedback.
Well, good luck on Saturday.
Thanks, mate.
Just thought I'd stop here outside Hiver Beers. This is their HQ. They don't actually brew here, they brew off-site, but Hiver specialise in beers made with honey. Not sure if anyone's about today. We'll just take a little look inside. Hello. So yeah, Blondale. It's a style popular in France and Belgium. It's kind of an alternative to pale ale or lager, and it can in fact also use lager yeast. It's generally characterised as having slightly less hop character than you would say from an English pale ale or a lager, a golden lager. Style-wise, it's similar to a pale ale or a Kolsch, in fact, or even a golden lager. Slightly less hop character than you expect in those styles. This, of course, you see that the foam comes right back onto it. Lovely looking beer. There's a little bit of condensation on the glass. You can see it's completely clear. Fantastic aroma coming off that. Yeah, it's a beautiful kind of rich, deep gold colour, almost bordering on amber. The aroma of the honey on it is fantastic. It's really there. It's noticeable, but it's not in any way kind of over the top or cloying or overly sweet on the nose. Ah, that's delicious, just as it should be. It's light, it's delicate, it's refreshing. There's a florality to it as well. It's not just all about the honey. The malt is certainly present as well. There's a kind of a bready note to it, and actually it's a bit like honey on white bread. Kind of almost like a childhood type flavour. It's kind of wholesome and really pleasing. There's a slight citrus note, citrus there as well. A slight spiciness too. Considering this is a brewery, however, that's focused on the use of honey in beer, the honey is quite restrained in it. It's crisp with quite a light body. It's not in any way sort of overly sweet or cloying. Certainly, yeah, it's really refreshing and actually kind of quite dry. It's the flavour of honey rather than the presence of honey. Does that make sense? Yeah, the honey is it's really well integrated. It's not, in that sense, it's not a honey beer. It's just a beer where one of the ingredients is honey, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's absolutely delicious. So I'm here with Hannah Rose, the founder of Hiver Brewery. Hannah, you've got quite obviously an unusual operation in terms of the BERMONDSEYbeerMile. Beers made primarily with honey as the ingredient, the key ingredient. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I think when I'd worked in brewing for years, and when the idea for Hiver came along was really after going beekeeping, doing an urban beekeeping course, and originally feeling like, oh wow, this is just amazing. It's the first time I felt as passionate about something as when I kind of first started to do beer tastings, thinking, wow, there's a beer out there for everybody. And in finding out a bit more about bees and realising, one, how cool they are, which I think most people agree with, it was really getting to grips with honey as an ingredient, and starting to think about honey as a raw sugar that has its own taste and flavour properties, and just how interesting that would be to play with from a fermentation and a brewing perspective. So I definitely, I guess, being a beer person, I had people always say, oh, what's the difference between honey beer and mead?
Yeah.
Mead is very much a honey wine, so maybe honey water yeast. Some breweries might not use water either. Whereas honey beer for me is that excitement of, rather than any additional sugar content, how could you find a real balance between your local raw honey, which is, as we work with urban beekeepers and we work with beekeepers in Yorkshire, it's all raw independent. How could we get the balance of those flavours with our cereals and our hops? And if you were fermenting with this raw natural sugar, where would the flavour profile go?
So that was going to be my question. So the honey that you brew with,
yeah.
You said some of it is urban, so London, local here, and some is from elsewhere in the country. And how do you decide which honeys you're going to use? Or my understanding with honey is that the blossoms, the flowers that the bees pollinate, that's what really affects the flavour. So do you use a variety, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess like way back, like when I started doing the recipe development, originally it was just urban London honey that I was using for the trial brews, and that was really small scale, just a bit of fun, just to learn. And urban London honey is quite citrusy. The bees have been feeding on lime and acacia trees that the Victorians planted all over the city in all urban areas of the UK. So that massively impacts and affects the flavour of the honey, and that's where when you start to talk to independent beekeepers, they start to talk about varietals of honey based on the forage type. That might be a flower, a tree, a herb. So there's a whole other conversation there that we can have another day. But really it was just the urban honey that I was trial brewing with originally, and it had these lovely citrusy notes when you tasted it, and it had a nice aftertaste.
Works so well in beer, of course. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. But it was quite weak on the nose, so it was just finding, starting to learn which honey varietals maybe complemented one another, and using different honeys in the way that some brewers might use different hops. So
Yorkshire,
an aroma hop and a flavour hop, like as crude as that is to describe it in that way.
Sure.
That was sort of the way that it started to develop with the fermenting different types of honey in the recipe.
Great, wow. Going past the Porsche garage here, lovely old classics.
How do they know them all?
Yeah.
And they.
Here at the Marcus of Wellington. This is a place where usually we'll meet our guests on the tours. Really nice pub. It is a chain pub, part of the Enterprise Inns group, but they've done a really great job of kind of being inclusive and stocking beers from all the local breweries, particularly Antipac and Holiday opposite. The train's going over. So they're really looking forward to opening tomorrow as well, and it's a real sort of hub for the area. A lot of the brewers will come here and drink after hours and that kind of stuff as well, so yeah, good spot. So yeah, it's still on Druid Street. We're just going past the Antipac and Holiday. Was the brewery, now the tap room, not open at the moment, but I'm not sure if they're opening this weekend. But yeah, definitely one of the kind of the original craft breweries on the BERMONDSEYbeerMile here on Druid Street. So my next couple of beers for you are from Antipac and Holiday. Now, Antipac and Holiday these are all great breweries, and I love them all. Obviously, that's why they're on the film. But Antipac and Holiday are a particular favourite of mine. They are a brewery that I always visit on the tours that I do down on the BERMONDSEYbeerMile, or did, and hopefully will do again soon. They are another one of the kind of the earlier ones down there, one of the original breweries on the mile, and they've subsequently opened up a new site as well. But the tap room and still their brewery on the mile is a great place to visit. And the two beers I've got for you are classic styles, and this is a brewery that, as well as doing forward-thinking, modern and experimental beers, just does classic beers really, really well. I'm going to start with their ordinary bitter. Just a word on the name of the beer. So it's called an ordinary bitter. Now, apologies, obviously, for those of you who are pretty up on your beers, but ordinary bitter is not a value judgment. It's an expression of strength. It's a traditional style, and you have ordinary, best, and then you've probably heard of extra special bitter as well. So this is a very much a sessionable beer, 3.7%. So yeah, let's pour it. Pours pretty lively, especially for a bitter. So ordinarily this beer would be more frequently found in cask, hand poured beer. It's pretty lively, as you can see, for a bitter, but that's can carbonation. Just let that settle down for a moment. Let's calm down a bit. So yeah, as you can see, it pours amber with a tan foam. It's clear, not quite clear. That might just be a bit of a chill haze on that. It's aroma of sort of earthiness, dark fruits, got a figginess to it as well. And this really, I mean, to me, I live abroad now. I live in Holland, but this kind of smells of England to me. It's got a sort of a woody, sort of earthiness to it, as I say. And it's crisp and light-bodied, you expect of the percentage. And yeah, like so many people, I was kind of, when I first started working in beer, was drawn to beer by the kind of these big American IPAs and the New World hop flavors and that kind of stuff. But to be honest, the more time I spend in beer, the more I appreciate classic styles, and this is just a really great example of a traditional classic English style. Not trying to do too much, blow you away. Just easy drinking, but plenty of flavour, especially at as I say, at a relatively low ABV of 3.7. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in terroir. So some people think it's a load of rubbish, but I mean what I mean by that is both the right beer for the right moment, the right occasion, the right location, the right food, but also beers and wine and food reflect the environment that they're produced in or grown in. And there's tea isn't grown in the UK, but there's a note of kind of like stewed tea there, which somehow is quintessentially English, and a nuttiness. And I think this is a beer that it's going to go great with traditional British food. Let's say just something as simple as a ploughman's washed down by an ordinary bitter like this is going to be a real treat, and it's an everyday thing, but it's a treat at the same time, I think. Yeah, we're just out here outside the bottle shop, as was unfortunately closed down. It's craft beer. Beer is not a high margin business, and that's why your support for your local breweries and the breweries down here on the BERMONDSEYbeerMile is so important. Yeah, in this little bit on Enid Street here, you've got some of the best known breweries on the mile. So here, Bristol Brewery, you've got Cloudwater. At Manchester, we've opened up a tap room here. You've got Brew by Numbers, who I think was the second brewery on the mile after the Colonel. Sweden, which is a craft beer tap room featuring Swedish beer. So yeah, let's have a little look. So we're just here with Simon, the tap room manager for Brew by Numbers, down here on Enid Street.
Just get the bar. Footage.
Wondering, they're getting ready for Saturday for reopening. How's it going? Looking forward to it?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, it's a very unique thing to be doing again, reopening the bar.
Yeah.
We're really excited about it. We're putting all the safety measures in place, trying to get it all, just ready for people to come in and drink safely.
Mind if you just have a little look around? Appreciate it's not kind of fully set up, just a quick quiz, just wander through. Thanks.
So obviously all this beer is going out for sale. We're basically using this as our warehouse space at the moment. And today and tomorrow we're going to be cleaning it all up and turning it up into a bar.
So similarly with the Colonel, I don't think any tour of the BERMONDSEYbeerMile would be complete without a beer from Brew by Numbers, who were the second brewery on the mile and very much kind of inspired by Colonel. And there are kind of a lot of similarities in the breweries in the sense that they are constantly innovating. They rarely make, if ever, I think, make the same beer twice. But I'm going to go not with an experimental beer, but with one of their pale ales. You may well have a slightly different pale ale in your box because, as I say, they're constantly bringing out new iterations of the beers. But it's their pale ale. Its pale ale is 42. They use numbers to express the styles that they have and different iterations after that. The pale ale I have is the 9th edition of the number 42, which is their pale ale, and I guess it's I try to choose beers that kind of sum up the breweries, or you know, if they're not their flagship, certainly are the type of styles that I associate with them. And yeah, double dry hopped pale ales and IPAs are certainly what I think of first when I think of brew by numbers. And this is, yeah, fabulous juicy beer. Let's pour it and see what we think. So yeah, pours hazy and pale, as you would expect. One thing I particularly like about this iteration I've got, the 9th edition, so you may well have a different one, is this one. They've used the Equinox hop, which adds a certain sort of, or distinguishes it slightly from a lot of the other big sort of dry hop, double dry hop pale ales out there, in the sense that it's slightly more kind of herbal, a slight sort of hop green sourness, sort of slight eucalyptus note to it. Still extremely juicy, tropical hop notes in there. Quite a full mouth feel. Absolutely delicious. But yeah, as I say, it's just a little something else going on there to make you think. Slightly more botanical, perhaps, alongside the fruit. So just a little bit more going on. Super smashable, 5.7, which is, you know, in terms of a US pale ale style, is about spot on, I think, before you start going up into IPA territory. And I don't know, I find myself kind of actually slightly moving down the ABVs in terms of my preferences. And certainly if you're drinking, you know, a can this side by yourself, perhaps you're not, perhaps you're sharing, I hope you are, then yeah, I think that's a great ABV. It's strong enough, it's got plenty of flavour in. Alcohol is a vehicle for flavour, but extremely drinkable with it. Brew by Numbers Brewery, this is Tom here. We're going to take a little wander down.
So just preparing some cherries for a sour beer we're making, and these are cherries that are grown in pen, separating the stones from them to infuse them, so we're using the whole cherry skin stones.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So yeah, the brew house.
Yeah.
So we've been here since 2013, May. Before that we're bringing a basement on Southern Bridge Road. And yeah, we've just, this is our original site. We've shoehorned in as many tanks as we can. So yeah, we can produce sort of 42,000 litres a month at the moment. And then yeah, we have an on-site 75 and in Patrick as well. So yeah, this is where it all happens.
Right. So I'm here with Reese, owner of Bianca Road Brewery. So yeah, Bianca Road are a brewery inspired by the West Coast United States, and this, you know, almost all of their beers are West Coast IPA, West Coast Pale Ale style, so quite bitter. It's a style that kind of went out of fashion a little bit, but is now very much back in. Despite being a hazy beer, this is quite a bitter beer alongside all the tropical fruit notes that you're getting. So it's kind of for them, I guess. It's kind of a nod to the sort of the hazy New England, but it's still kind of somewhere, I guess, in that sense, in the middle of America. It's got, you know, a big fruit character, but there's certainly discernible bitterness to it too, which I like. It certainly is true to its name. It certainly is. It's tropical, and there is a, I guess from the Amarillo hop, there's a kind of some orange there, and there's kind of a pithy note, orange pith note as well. And I'm a big fan of this. It's somewhere in between kind of the New England style or the hazy style, but it's certainly got that touch of bitterness to it as well. It's got a medium body, kind of a grapefruit sherbet. That's lovely. It's 5.3%. And it's just, yeah, the level of bitterness in, I would say, I would describe it as refreshing, without being overpowering, and with the tropical fruit there as well. I think that's a great balance. It is perhaps more of a summertime beer. but certainly that's I think that's lovely all the time. These guys have come on leaps and bounds. I did visit them at Bianca Road, their original site, and when you get the chance to go to their Bermondsey tap room, it's really great in there. They've got 2 arches, and it's a really great space, and they're clearly making some fantastic beers. It's a great tap room you've got in here. If you guys ever do get the chance to come down in person, but they've actually got kind of 2 arches. It's a really lovely space. So yeah, you've got. I mean, I'd say out of most of the breweries down here, you've probably got one of the better tap rooms for the social distancing, drinking safely. Yeah.
We've got a bit of space, which is great. But we'll see how we go.
So here we are at Spa Terminus, Spa Road still, and we've got the Colonel Brewery here. Colonel Brewery, the original craft brewery on the BERMONDSEYbeerMile. This is, I think, their 3rd or maybe 4th location within the area, and very much still the gold standard in London craft beer. Let's go and have a little look. Colonel opened in 2009, and its founder, Evan O'Riordan, I mean, it's really the start of craft beer in London. And I still see Colonel really as kind of the gold standard in kind of London craft beer. So yeah, as I say, no tour of Bermondsey certainly, and let alone London even would be complete without a Colonel beer. Yeah, it's got a slight tropical note to it, and then it's fairly kind of medium to full bodied as you'd expect on a beer that's 6.8%. Yeah, it's got a fairly full body to it actually, bordering on a kind of almost syrupy, and quite a high bitterness. And actually, yeah, you can get a good amount of malt on that, which is not always the case in American IPAs and pales. I certainly can get some bread or even slightly richer notes in there. Nigma is an Australian hop. It's got it's not one I'm hugely familiar with, but it's like a melon and kind of berry, raspberry note to it. It's pretty bitter. I mean, it's a 6% IPA, so you would expect that, but that's quite bitter. Despite, as I say, that kind of being able to pick the malty notes and the sort of slightly syrupy, thicker, bordering on kind of deeper territory. Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, we're just at the end of Unit Street here, and this is called Spa Road, here you can see on the sign here. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but Spa Road Terminus, essentially this is the first elevated railway line in the world. This whole area, before the railways came in, kind of like not exactly a slum, but there was loads of business, loads of activities going on, and to try and come through with the railway through here would have just been too much hard work. So essentially they realised the best thing to do was lift it up, elevate it. So as I say, first elevated railway in the world, so a little bit of history here. And the nice thing, my favourite things about Bermondsey actually is the you don't have to look too hard, and the history just jumps out at you all over the place. And the railway itself and the railways in general, a large part of their development was actually to do with the transportation of beer around the country. So there's a certain circularity to that, and the fact that all of the arches that the breweries are in exist, trains just going by now, exist because of the elevated railways, and now these the renaissance of small brewery brewing and craft brewing in this country taking place within those arches. It's just a certain sort of pleasing circularity to that. Oh yeah, look.
It is.
Here we have one of the few remaining Wimpeys in the UK. So I think they've actually reopened themselves a new Wimpy here.
That's a lovely guy, isn't he?
Oh, he's such a nice guy, isn't he?
Go.
So here we are, final third of the Bermondsey Beer Mile, Almond Road. Probably the least well-known little section of it, but it's got some of the best breweries on the mile, so let's have a little look down here as well. First brewery you get along here is Affinity, which is one of my favourite breweries. Let's have a look inside.
Go.
So yeah, I'm just got our heads into Affinity Brewery. This is one of the founders, Steve, in the bar, your ethos.
Yeah, so we've been going for just over 3 years now. We started in Tottenham and moved down to Bermondsey at the end of 2017.
Yeah.
End of 2017. And yeah, we've been producing some nice sort of pale ales, IPAs, with a focus on sort of Belgian stuff as well. Some saisons, lime zest, coriander saison goes down really well. Just super drinkable, easy stuff that goes down well in the sun.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. So here we are at Partisan Brewing, one of the original breweries on the Bermondsey Beer Mile. Let's have a look. So finished up the tour with two beers from Partisan Brewery. Partisan, another one of the kind of the original batch of breweries that were down on the Bermondsey Beer Mile. And the next beer I'm going to drink is one of their saisons. It's the Lemon and Thyme Saison, and they're a brewery that I kind of think of when I think of saisons when I think of them. Of course, they make all sorts of styles, like all of these breweries. But they do a lot of beers for the restaurant trade. A lot of the beers in bottle, and the saison is obviously a style that is fantastic. It's a food beer really, and this one is quite light in terms of the ABV, but it's really complex and delicious, and as I say, it's one that I've kept towards the end of the film, and yeah, I would definitely recommend trying it with kind of almost any food really. It's a bit of a sommelier's dream, the style saison. Great with cheese, great with Thai food, and the reason I've chosen this saison for kind of this time of year is it's one that I think will go really well with dishes that people are eating this time of year. So things like roast and kind of heavier roasted sort of hot food as opposed to summertime stuff. I've got another one for that later in the year. So yeah, let's taste the Lemon and Thyme Saison from Partisan. This is the Partisan DD. DD standing for two things: the double dry hop, of course, but also, as it says on the can, as an homage to the cat that they had to get rid of in lockdown one, their Mouser, the brewery Mouser. It's 5.5% double dry hop pale ale. I love this beer. It's got all that flavour there. It's relatively low bitterness, but you've got all the hop character you could possibly want in a pale ale, and it's not too bitter. It's just a really drinkable, delicious modern pale ale. So bottoms up to that. Hello.
On Saturdays.
So here we are at Partisan Brewery. I'm just chatting with Tom, who's the head brewer here.
So we do predominantly bottles. A lot of our trade pre-COVID was restaurants. So kind of throughout this we've actually started moving into can slightly.
Yeah.
So
You got your own canning line?
Not yet. So we're working. We were working with Group on this just during lockdown, and now that's kind of finished. We're going to get them in.
Yeah, of course, yeah. This goes very well.
So, but yeah, hopefully, I think we'll run a canning line and a bottling line in tandem because, like I said, a big part of our trade is restaurants. Sort of restaurants that like cans.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, no, exactly, and you know, getting them open even.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's still just finding their feet again, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's in town? What are you most excited about at the moment?
We are currently, I'll grab a bottle of it. We've got a new beer called Didi. So we used to have a cat called Adina.
Yeah.
And her nickname was Didi, but obviously we went here for 6 weeks, so we rehomed it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so she...
in memoriam Didi.
Yeah, so she lived here, she was a working cat, so she was really good. And, but yeah, obviously it wasn't fair on her to leave her here by herself for that period of time. So yeah, we've done so Didi is a DDH double dry hop pale. So this is the first sort of, we did a initial release as part of the Brugger. I think that didn't actually end up happening in the end because it was lockdown. But yeah, so this is kind of the second iteration of it, and then we've got a third iteration in tank when we go into cans. So the third one along, I think with each batch is going to get better. We're learning a lot.
Well, hopefully we can get that in a box and out to our customers as well. So yeah, pours kind of a deep golden, sort of light copper colour. And yeah, obviously it's a yeast-driven beer, and that's what you're getting out of it. It's kind of spiciness. There's some citrus, herbal notes from the thyme. Smells like a posh bathroom. Yeah, there's a dryness to it. Kind of medium, I'd say a medium body. It's got a long finish. The aftertaste stays around. And yeah, just a beautiful complexity to it. Floral, herbal, thirst quenching. Yeah, it's quite dry. Yeah, delicate, botanical. It's a beer that makes you think. Keeps you kind of trying to pull apart all the different flavours you've got in there. There's spiciness. There's even perhaps kind of slight, almost like leathery note to it. That sounds strange. Yeah, great food beer.
Okay.
So, do you mind if we just have a quick look down into the brewery as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
So how many fermenters have you got?
We've got 7 now, so we did have 6 and we just about 6 months ago put in this old one here.
Yeah.
So 7 of these, they're all kind of max capacity 3,000 litres, so 30 hec. We brew, depending on the style, ABV kind of thing, anywhere between kind of 24 hec and the full 30 hec.
Just fill us in a little bit about your special kettle as well.
As you can probably see, our hot side kit isn't the most glamorous sort of brew houses out there. But our owner, Andy, I'm pretty sure he made it out of.
I heard he found it in a field.
Yeah, he said stories that it was part of an old nuclear reactor or something like that. But honestly, this thing. Like the FVs, you'll have a skin walling. This thing is literally about that big in terms of metal, so whatever is purposeful.
So yeah, come the apocalypse, hide in your kettle. I hope you've enjoyed your virtual tour at the Bermondsey Beer Mile. We've been to quite a few places. I hope you've enjoyed your beers, of course, as well. Thank you so much for supporting independent British beer, London beer. These guys really need your support. Please keep ordering. If you've enjoyed them, please keep ordering them. We're going to be also coming back, revisiting this tour, revisiting the route, revisiting these breweries as we go along. So yeah, please do, check back in again as well, because we'll be having new iterations with different beers as we go along. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been my first one of these that I've done. I've really enjoyed doing it. If I just kind of sign off with a few thoughts kind of around beer. It's a crazy time for everybody right now, all over the world, for various reasons. So I guess I just want to say thank you for booking this experience, or thank you to whoever booked it or bought it for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do spread the word, pass it on. If you've not enjoyed it, obviously don't tell anyone. But yeah, just about independent beer, it's a really hard time for everyone in hospitality. My job disappeared overnight. I also do an event called the London Craft Beer Cruise. Hopefully we'll be cruising later on this year, but who knows. But if I can just give you one takeaway from this recording, it's please do buy independent beer. Please do contact these breweries, buy directly from the brewery if you can. It's possible to get good beer in supermarkets nowadays, and that's great, but supermarkets are doing fine. The breweries that they buy the beer from are not always doing fine, and if you can go direct to them, please do. Please do look me up on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I'm always happy to give advice or help you out or put you in the right direction as far as I can. Very happy to do that. We live in a time when we're urged to be patriotic, be British, but what are we actually proud about? Well, we make great beer. We've always made great beer in the UK. Let's try and keep that going by protecting, preserving and supporting our independent breweries. Thanks for your time.